What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice. As today we're talking Season 5, Episode 3 of Dark Side of the Ring, Terry Gordy, Final Flight of the Freebird. Honestly, of the 3 episodes we've gotten so far, and they've all been great, I thought this one was the best of the bunch. And not only because I didn't really know much of what was discussed. That was kind of a similar story with Earthquake and with Buff Bagwell last week. But just, I don't know, it really did come down to like the drugs and the alcohol and the stuff that you would usually expect out of the show. The stuff that we heard last week was just batshit crazy, which was also very entertaining by Dark Side of the Ring standards. But I don't know, I just really liked the way they covered the life of Terry Gordy. Again, I'm familiar with the Freebirds. I'm vaguely familiar with Terry Gordy on his own, but not to this extent. And I thought they did a really good job of recapping everything. And again, the show leaves stuff out. That's not really what I'm discussing here today. I'm just reviewing what I saw on the show and giving my thoughts along the way. So let's get into it here. We first hear from the daughter Miranda, who is actually a wrestler as well. She's on the independent circuit. She's wrestled for a variety of different promotions. I know I've seen her on AEW Dark before and a few other companies as well. She talks about the pressure growing up of having being a second-generation wrestler. We also hear from her brother, Ray Gordy, a.k.a. Jesse from WWE, Jesse and Festus. He was also Slim Master Jay for a short period of time. You know what's funny? For the longest time, probably until the Freebirds were inducted in 2016, maybe I had heard of this and it just didn't really dawn on me at the time. I did not know that he was a second-generation wrestler. Certainly not in 2008 when I first started watching wrestling or soon after. I did not know he was the son of Freebird Terry Gordy. And I don't know if he was more talented than WWE led him on to be. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't follow Jesse's career too closely in WWE and his in-ring acumen and stuff like that. But I thought that was fascinating when I found that out. I'm like, hey, that's Jesse, the WWE Hall of Fame. Holy shit, he's the son of Terry Gordy. I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, he also talks about how he didn't think he could live up to his father's name, which is why he didn't use his name in the ring in WWE. I also thought it might have been a case of, and again, this isn't confirmed, that WWE just didn't want him to use the name. In the last 10 years or so, WWE's done a better job of acknowledging people's roots and where they come from. Solo Sikoa and the Usos being members of the Anoa'i family, Roman Reigns as well. But even Charlotte Flair, like for a while, Charlotte Flair was just Charlotte. And that might have been her decision too. But she also adopted the Flair last name in the ring and became Charlotte Flair and whatever. But I also think it might have been a case of WWE just not wanting to call him Ray Gordy and acknowledging him being the son of Terry Gordy on TV. For whatever reason, WWE was kind of infamous for that for quite a while there in the late 2000s, early 2010s. But anyway, Terry, they talk about how Terry himself did not want to do anything but wrestle. That was his life. We hear from Jim Cornette throughout most of the episode, and he calls Terry Gordy a prodigy. They talk about how we met Michael Hayes, who was a natural talker. They were a great pairing. We hear from Jerry Garvin, who talks about their chemistry as a team and then kind of forming the Freebirds and really clicking on all cylinders there, firing on all cylinders there. Terry was the one who came up with the Freebird name, apparently, and it was using the song by Leonard Skinner, and they used that as their entrance music. And Cornette talks about how around that time there really wasn't a lot of people who came out to entrance music. And not that they were the first ones, but they were among the first people to do it and really bring it to prominence. And Freebird's a great song, obviously. So using that as their name and as their entrance music immediately made them stars. In addition to the duo and the group itself just being really talented, a really talented trio. So they talk about how we joined Mid-South, was joined by Buddy Roberts. They put the Von Erichs to the test. And they talk about the Von Erichs Freebirds feud throughout those couple of years there in Texas and all those different territories. We hear from former world-class promoter David Manning, who talks about the dynamic of both stables and how they work so well together, and the chemistry there with the Freebirds being the style and the Von Erichs bringing the substance, and how well that worked as a rivalry around that time. We hear from Mick Foley a lot throughout this episode as well. He calls the Freebirds the original cool heels in wrestling, and how they made them out to Texas for 2 years with all their matches and the feuds and the angles and stuff like that. Back to Terry Gordy on his own, though. They talked about how he would drink all night and would just wrestle the next day. And his son, I almost called him Jesse, Ray, his son Ray talked about how he was kind of the mindset, along with other wrestlers at that time, that he would just literally sweat out the alcohol the next day. Sweat it out through your pores, and that's how you can work off the hangover, stuff like that. The daughter recalls him beating up a cop car at one point. He got arrested and started beating up the cop car while handcuffed. Like fucking headbutting it, started bleeding, I believe. It was just quite the scene to reenact here, and that was really just a taste of what the guy was capable of. And what they did with him beyond that, I don't know. I mean, I would assume beating up a cop car, even though you didn't physically assault a cop, would probably get you arrested for even longer. But I'm not exactly sure how that was resolved because they moved on to the next thing after that. They talked about how drugs and the alcohol, all the drugs that he was taking and the alcohol he was consuming, turned into a pill problem for Terry Gordy. They went into a meeting with Vince hungover. So the time of the Freebirds in WWE as performers did not last long. They talked about how they worked all of one match for the WWF, and that was it. Soon after that, he got himself over in Japan on his own by working, having a singles career in Japan, having a great run over there. But in the process, they, worked a really hard-hitting style. They still do today, but especially back then, especially the big man, gaijin, I think would be the right word to use, style. And he was really hard-hitting, highly physical, in the process tearing both of his ACLs. So we contacted Richard Simmons about losing weight. He's, I don't know, a dance instructor, physical, I don't know what the right term would be. They showed the footage here on the episode, so I can't really put it into words as far as, fitness guru, I guess? I mean, there is a term for it. It's not coming to my mind off the top of my head right now, but kind of like the Simon Dean, that sort of thing, if you can catch my drift. You probably already know who Richard Simmons is. I personally don't. I'm on the younger side, so I don't know who Richard Simmons is. I know I've heard the name before, but not overly familiar with what he does. But that's not the point. They talk about how he started teaming with Steve Williams, Dr. Death Steve Williams, after he lost weight, and he looked great. They show the footage of him after contacting Richard Simmons and doing that whole, weight loss program. And he looked great after losing all that weight, but he was never really home. So he resorted to pills and never really saw his family. And that after a certain point, he needed to be pushed in a wheelchair. So they tell this story about how he started dying on a plane, like he just passed out, wouldn't come to consciousness. It was like a really bad scene. The guy almost fucking died, and he was in a coma for a couple days after that. So his stepmother, not his stepmother, but the stepmother, Ray and Miranda talk about how their stepmother was the one who went over there, got him back to consciousness, brought him home, and really took care of him for a while. And then after that whole issue happened, I think they may have mentioned what exactly it was that he endured. I missed it here in my notes, but it was bad enough that the nephew talked about how, and the son and daughter talked about how he was very quiet after that, and he had to relearn things. So it was a pretty bad experience to the point where physical damage was done and mental damage was done. So his nephew worked. I couldn't believe this when they mentioned this. The nephew worked with Terry Gordy to get him back in the ring. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the guy personally. Maybe they knew something we didn't or don't, whatever. But just from the footage they showed, the pictures they showed, and the way they were talking about the injury that he endured that put him in a coma for a couple days, which is pretty serious, obviously, to say the least, you would think the guy would never wrestle again. If he was very quiet and had to relearn things like simple activities such as walking and wiping his own ass and shit like that, why would getting him back in the ring be a wise decision? And again, I know they said and they reiterated it here, wrestling was all he knew. That was all he wanted to do. He didn't know anything but wrestling for work. Like he never had any other job in his life but wrestling. And that was all the guy knew, so that's what he wanted to do. But they enabled him, it sounded like to me, by getting him back in the ring really at all, but a lot sooner than they probably should have. And Cornette, I don't know if he kind of went along with it. He brought Terry Gordy into Smoky Mountain Wrestling to perform for him. And he mentioned here, if you think he's good enough, then bring him on in. Like, could you not fucking see the guy or talk to the guy and get a better idea of what he was capable of? For him, it sounded like for Cornette, it was more of a trial run type thing, where if he, did well, then we'll continue using him because maybe it'll come back to him. But it never did come back to him. That was the problem. So to even put him in that position was unfair to him, unfair to the fans, unfair to really everyone involved. I mean, it really was moreover than anything else unsafe for Gordy, for his opponents, and everyone else involved in the situation, like I said. But, I mean, Cornette didn't think better to not even really use him. Because the way he was talking about it again, it was like, he might, if he does well, then we'll continue using him. No, then don't use him in the first place. If he was out there, I mean, I guess he wasn't having terrible matches, but if it was a stark contrast from the Terry Gordy that you know, and you were giving the guy a paycheck, then have him do something else. Pay him to do something else on your show. Maybe not promos, because apparently he wasn't really good at that anymore either, but find a different role for the guy. So they talk about the Smoky Mountain Wrestling stuff. They show footage of that. How there was no life in anything he did, doing the death match with Foley. That was like the standout moment of his post-injury career, I guess. and how wrestling was all he knew. They reiterated that time and time again. Okay, then again, find something else for him to do in wrestling other than fucking wrestling, because clearly that was not working out after a while. And they mentioned it just never really came back to him. So then they get into the RF shoot video done by that freak Rob Feinstein, that fucking weirdo. But he did a shoot interview with Terry Gordy around this time, and they show clips from it, and it's like disturbing. Because you can tell he's not all there. The way he's just kind of awkwardly isn't even really the word to use, but like just blankly staring. There really is, like, it's like the lights are on and nobody's home type thing. Like, it was fucking scary to watch, just from the clips they showed here. And I'm thinking, again, why anyone would think that he had enough sense, why anyone would have enough sense to put him back in a ring to wrestle or cut promos is beyond me. And then they brought him into WWF, and I'm also thinking, what the fuck? So Michael Hayes was instrumental in bringing Terry Gordy into WWF around that same period as the Executioner, a mask gimmick working with Foley and Paul Bearer, The Undertaker. And they said, we put him in a mask and didn't acknowledge that he was Terry Gordy because they wanted to protect his legacy. Yeah, okay. I mean, honestly, that might be part of it. Maybe that is the reason. But a lot of all the disgusting stuff, literally and figuratively, that Vince McMahon and the WWE have done over the years, I would not put it past them that they just wanted to put him in a dumbass gimmick. They didn't want to acknowledge his time in the business, and maybe that was the case where, we'll protect him. Well, if you really wanted to protect him, you don't put him in the fucking position to begin with. If you really want to employ the guy, you make him a producer or have him work behind the scenes. Why put him out there in matches where it was pretty clear the guy couldn't go? I mean, they showed clips of his matches with The Undertaker around this point on an In Your House pay-per-view and an In Your House event, and it was terrible. I know I've seen the match before because I've gone back and watched all the In Your House shows. That was years ago. I don't recall this match at all. But man, that fucking sucked. So again, they probably thought, it'll come back to him. That Terry Gordy, he's a great talented performer, and he was at one point. But post whatever traumatic injury that he suffered that caused so much physical and primarily, more importantly, mental damage, it was not safe for him or his opponents for Terry Gordy to be in the ring. So again, everyone was really at fault here. I think the family, Cornette, WWE, Hayes, whatever. I mean, the fact he was wrestling as much as he was my top takeaway from this documentary. The fact that he was wrestling as much as he was, at that point, post-injury, it was like sad to watch. And the nephew even said he was watching the WWE run, and it was sad to watch. He got put in the faction with Mankind and Bearer, like I mentioned, and the guy would just disappear. Like, Foley and Bearer would have to go out trying to find the guy in the streets. And they knew it just wouldn't work out. And The Undertaker even said, they didn't interview him here for this, obviously, but I don't know who it was. They mentioned that Taker said it just wouldn't work. He goes, this shit ain't going to work. Those were his exact words, I guess. So Foley and Bearer, again, talk about, not Bearer, but Foley, they had to go out and find him several times, and it's like Jeff Hardy at Victory Road. Where is this guy? And it just didn't work. So they let him go, and that run ended fairly quickly. Foley said it also broke his heart to see Gordy at an indie show where he had no line. Maybe all of 2 or 3 people went in the ring to go take a picture with him. The daughter was the one taking the pictures. And it broke Foley's heart, where the guy just had no line, not realizing that he was a legend, no one gave a shit about him, and it broke his heart. And his son, Ray, talked about the biggest positive for him around that time, not being the son himself, was that he got to know his father. He spent a lot of time with his dad. He was off the road, not really wrestling as much. He really got to spend a lot of time and know his father a lot better than at any other point in his life prior to that point. So he was supposed to team with his dad in an indie show. The dad asked him. The son said no, for whatever reason. Either he had something going on or wasn't interested, whatever. It actually ended up being soon after that show. He did the match, and he was found unresponsive at his home. The nephew knew he was gone while trying to revive him, and so he died, actually. He died of congestive heart failure, they mentioned, in July 2001 at age 40. 40! I'm thinking, there's no fucking way. Like, I saw the footage of him in the ring, specifically the shoot interview. The guy looks 60, and that's being generous. The guy looks 60. He was fucking 40 years old. That is crazy. And then they end the episode with Cornette talking about how, Gordy would want his story to be shared and to kind of spread the message and help other people and stuff like that. And they call him great in the ring and also a great person, and his legacy will live on. So a great episode, a really fucking sad, depressing episode, though. Again, I knew almost none of this. I knew of and know of Terry Gordy, but none of this stuff behind the scenes. I'm not a big, I don't know what the word would be, but like territory guy. So a lot of this was news to me. I thought a lot of it was fascinating. The way they had the family in there was great. Cornette was in there. Mick Foley, another person he was close with at several points in his career later on. I thought was really well done. Again, a really sad story, and the guy apparently just doesn't get his just due as far as being as good as he is. Thankfully, again, like I said, the Freebirds were put in the Hall of Fame in 2016. I think his son was the one representing him at that point. May have even been the one to induct him. I don't remember. But I remember him being there. And, yeah, just a really good episode. Definitely check it out right now on Vice, their YouTube channel, wherever you can find the episode, because it was well worth it. The episode next week is on Brutus Beefcakes. That should be interesting. That's coming up on Tuesday. My review of said episode will be up here on the channel. I try to have them up on Sundays. I know this is going up on Monday. I've just been backed up this weekend. It should be up this Sunday, so keep an eye out for that on Easter Sunday. You can enjoy your Easter by hearing me talk about Brutus Beefcake. So that's something to look forward to, I suppose. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Have an awesome one, folks. I'm Gordy Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.